They called him the King of Chicago, a man who could silence a room with a single look. But after his wife's funeral, Donovan Kincaid wasn't a king. He was a ghost haunting his own penthouse. His empire was intact, but his son was starving, refusing every bottle, crying for a mother who would never come back. Donovan was 5 seconds away from pulling the trigger on his own sanity, until a woman he didn't hire walked through the door. She didn't look like a maid. She looked like trouble. And when she whispered 2 words, everything changed. This is the story of the Mafia boss and the hungry baby. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Donovan Kincaid stood by the floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass of his penthouse on the 45th floor of the Legacy Tower. Below him, the city was a grid of amber lights and misery. Behind him, the sound was deafening. It wasn't the sound of sirens or the rattle of a Thompson submachine gun. Sounds Donovan had grown up with since he was a runner for the Irish mob on the South Side. It was the high-pitched, jagged scream of a 6-month-old boy. Leo. The baby was red-faced, his tiny fists bunching the silk sheets of the custom-made crib. "Please," Donovan rasped. His voice, usually a baritone that commanded boardrooms and underground bunkers alike, was cracked. He looked at the formula bottle in his hand. It was lukewarm, exactly 98.6 degrees, just as the expensive pediatrician from Northwestern Memorial had instructed. "Leo, take it, please." He brought the nipple to the baby's lips. Leo thrashed, turning his head violently, wailing louder. The sound tore through Donovan's chest, sharper than the shrapnel he still carried in his shoulder from the 19 dock wars. "He won't eat, Mr. Kincaid." Donovan turned. Mrs. Gable, the third nanny in as many days, stood by the doorway. She was clutching her purse like a shield. She looked terrified, not of the baby, but of the father. Donovan knew what he looked like. 3 days of stubble, a rumpled Armani dress shirt stained with spit-up, and eyes that looked like 2 burnt holes in a sheet. "He has to eat," Donovan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Make him eat." "I've tried everything," Mrs. Gable stammered, backing away. He wants his mother. He smells that she's gone. It's trauma, sir. I can't stay. The atmosphere in this house, it's too heavy. You're leaving?" Donovan took a step forward. The Beretta 92 FS sitting on the marble coffee table glinted under the chandelier. Mrs. Gable's eyes darted to it. "I'll send for my agency to collect my things. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Kincaid. Truly." She fled. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Donovan alone with the scream. He looked back at the crib. It had been 1 week since the car bomb. 1 week since Isabella had turned the key in the Mercedes G-Wagon, while Donovan was still putting on his coat in the foyer. The explosion had shattered the windows of the brownstone across the street. They had buried an empty casket. Since that moment, Leo had barely eaten. He was losing weight. His ribs were starting to show beneath his pale skin. He rejected the formula, rejected the wet nurses Donovan had paid thousands for, rejected the world. Donovan approached the crib and lifted the bundle. Leo felt light. Too light. The baby smelled of talcum powder and distress. He didn't smell like Isabella. Isabella had smelled of vanilla and gunpowder, the scent of a woman born into the life, who knew how to love a monster. "I don't know what to do," Donovan whispered into the baby's soft hair. He walked the length of the dark living room, pacing. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was Declan, his second in command. Donovan ignored it. If the triads were moving on the West Loop, let them. If the feds were raiding the warehouses, let them. If his son died, Donovan would burn the city to the ground and stand in the center of the flames. The elevator chimed. Donovan stiffened. The penthouse elevator required a keycard or biometric scan. Mrs. Gable had just left. Declan knew better than to come up unannounced when Leo was in a state. He shifted Leo to his left arm and grabbed the Beretta with his right. He didn't raise it, just held it against his thigh, concealed by the shadows. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. A woman stepped out. She wasn't wearing a nanny's uniform. She wore a simple black trench coat, belted tightly at the waist, wet from the rain. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe, practical knot, exposing a neck that looked porcelain fragile but held high. She carried a duffel bag that looked heavy. Donovan raised the gun. "You have 5 seconds to explain how you bypassed security before I paint the walls with you." The woman didn't flinch. She didn't look at the gun. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, locked onto Leo. "Put the gun down, Mr. Kincaid," she said. Her voice was low, smoky, and devoid of fear. "You're scaring him. Who are you?" "The agency sent me. They said you were desperate. They said the last 3 quit." "I didn't call the agency back. They have you on auto-dispatch for priority clients," she lied. Donovan knew it was a lie. He knew how the agency worked. But Leo let out a fresh, ragged scream that sounded like he was choking. The woman dropped her duffel bag. She walked toward him. She moved with a strange fluidity. Silent, balanced. A predator's walk, not a servant's. "Stop," Donovan warned, clicking the safety off. "He's hungry," she said, ignoring the weapon pointed at her chest. She stopped 2 feet from him. She smelled of rain and something else, something earthy, like sage. "He's starving, Donovan." The use of his first name stunned him. No staff member called him Donovan. She reached out. Her hands were slender, her nails short and unpolished. "Give him to me." "He hates strangers." "I'm not a stranger to pain," she said softly, "and neither is he." "Give him to me." Donovan hesitated. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was a hit. She was an assassin, a plant from the rival O'Connor family. She was going to snap Leo's neck and then shoot Donovan with his own gun. But then Leo looked at her. The baby paused his screaming for a microsecond, his tear-filled blue eyes widening. Donovan handed his son to the woman. She took him. She didn't cradle him like a porcelain doll. She held him firmly, secure against her chest, her hand supporting his neck with practiced confidence. She turned away from Donovan, shielding the baby from the sight of the gun. She began to hum. It wasn't a lullaby. It was a low, rhythmic melody, almost like a folk song from the old country. She walked to the sofa, sat down, and adjusted her coat. "The bottle," she ordered, not looking up. Donovan felt like a subordinate in his own home. He fetched the cold bottle from the table and handed it to her. She checked the temperature on her wrist, grimaced, and then did something strange. She pulled a small vial from her pocket and put a single drop of liquid onto the nipple of the bottle. "What is that?" Donovan surged forward, panic flaring. "Vanilla extract," she said calmly. "Pure, not the synthetic trash." She looked up at him. "Isabella wore vanilla perfume, didn't she?" Donovan froze. "How did you? Babies navigate by scent before sight. He thinks you're trying to poison him because the world smells wrong." She offered the bottle to Leo. The baby sniffed, whimpered, and then, miraculously, latched on. The silence that filled the room was heavier than the screaming. The only sound was the rhythmic suckling of the baby and the rain against the glass. Donovan watched, mesmerized. Leo's eyes fluttered closed, his fists uncurled. The woman looked up at Donovan. Her hazel eyes were unreadable, but for a second he saw a flash of intense sorrow. "I'm Vivian," she whispered. "Do you still need me?" Donovan lowered the gun. He looked at his son, finally eating, finally at peace. He looked at the woman who had walked past his security and disarmed him with a drop of vanilla. "You're hired," he said hoarsely. "But if you ever lie to me about who you really are, Vivian, I'll kill you myself." Vivian looked down at the baby, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Fair enough." The first night was suspicious. The second night was a revelation. By the third day, Vivian had reorganized the entire east wing of the penthouse. She didn't ask for permission. She just did it. She moved the crib away from the drafty window. She threw out the plastic toys that smelled of chemicals and replaced them with wooden blocks she seemingly produced from her magic duffel bag. Donovan watched her on the security monitors from his study. He had high-definition cameras in every room, a necessity in his line of work. "Boss," Declan said, standing on the other side of the mahogany desk. Declan was a massive man, a former bare-knuckle boxer, with a nose that had been broken 3 times. He was scrolling through a tablet. "I ran her. Vivian Cross. Social Security matches a woman from upstate New York. Clean record. Worked as a governess for the Vanderbilt family in Rhode Island for 2 years. Before that, it gets a bit fuzzy. A gap of 3 years. A gap? Donovan lit a cigar, the smoke curling up towards the ventilation system. Says she was traveling, backpacking in Europe. Donovan narrowed his eyes at the screen. In the nursery, Vivian was changing Leo. Her movements were efficient, clinical, but earlier, when she had been chopping vegetables in the kitchen because she refused to let the chef make Leo's puree, Donovan had noticed something. She held the knife like a weapon, not a tool. When the ice maker had discharged a sudden clatter of cubes, she hadn't jumped. She had pivoted on her heel, her center of gravity dropping, ready to strike. That wasn't the reaction of a governess from Rhode Island. That was muscle memory. "Keep digging," Donovan said. "Check Interpol. Check the private contractor lists. Blackwater, Halliburton, the sweethearts in the desert. You think she's a merc?" Declan laughed, a dry, barking sound. "She's changing a diaper, Don." "She walked through my security, Declan. The front desk said the system was looped for 30 seconds. Just enough time for her to get in the elevator." Declan stopped laughing. "I'll look deeper." Donovan stood up. "I'm going in there." He walked to the nursery. The door was ajar. He pushed it open. Vivian was sitting in the rocking chair, Leo asleep on her shoulder. The room was dark, lit only by the city glow. She didn't look up, but he knew she heard him. "He's out for the count," she whispered. "You moved the crib," Donovan said, leaning against the doorframe. He had removed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white shirt. The tattoos on his forearms, Latin script and geometric lines, were visible. The air vent was blowing directly on his chest. He was developing a cough. "You could have asked. You were busy deciding who to whack in the South Loop," she said. Donovan went still. The air in the room changed, temperature dropping. "I run a logistics company, Vivian." Vivian stood up slowly, transferring Leo into the crib with infinite gentleness. She tucked the blanket around him. Then she turned to face Donovan. In the half-light, she looked severe, beautiful, and dangerous. "Mr. Kincaid," she said, walking over to him so they were inches apart. "I cleaned your shirt yesterday. It smelled of sulfur and cordite. I found a 9mm casing in the cuff of your trousers, and 3 men in a dark sedan have been parked across the street for 6 hours watching this building." She looked him in the eye. "I don't care what you do. I don't care who you kill. My job is that boy. And right now, your logistics are putting him in danger." Donovan felt a strange pull in his chest. It wasn't just anger, it was respect. Isabella had been the only one who dared to speak to him like this. "If you know what I am," Donovan said, his voice low, "then you know you can't just leave." "I'm not leaving," she said. "I told you. He needs me. And what do you need, Vivian? Everyone wants something. Money? Protection?" She looked away towards the window. For a moment the mask slipped. He saw exhaustion in her posture. "Redemption," she murmured, so quiet he almost missed it. "From what?" "Everyone has ghosts, Donovan. Yours are just louder than most." She moved to step past him, but he caught her arm. His grip was firm, her muscles bunched under his touch, hard, defined. "The sedan across the street," he said. "What make?" "Chevy Suburban, 2024 model, armored glass, Maryland plates. They aren't cops. Cops don't have the patience to sit for 6 hours without a coffee break. They're pros." Donovan released her arm. His blood ran cold. Maryland plates usually meant one thing. The Bratva had outsourced to mercenaries from DC, or worse, a federal task force operating off the books. "Stay in the nursery," Donovan ordered, his demeanor shifting instantly from curious father to warlord. "Lock the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice." "Donovan," she said. He paused. "If they come up here," she said, reaching into the pocket of her dress, "don't worry about Leo." She pulled out a hairpin. It was long, metal, and filed to a needle-sharp point. She twirled it once between her fingers before tucking it back into her hair. "I'm very good at cleaning up messes." Donovan stared at her, a maid with a shiv in her hair. He nodded once, turned and walked towards the living room. He pulled his phone out. "Declan, get the boys up here, now, and bring the heavy bags. We have company." As he loaded a fresh magazine into his Beretta, Donovan realized two things. First, the war he thought was paused had just restarted. And second, the woman in the nursery was the most dangerous thing in his house. And for the first time since Isabella died, he didn't feel entirely alone. The silence in the penthouse was worse than the noise of the city. Donovan had cut the main power breaker himself, plunging the 45th floor into an abyss of shadows. He crouched behind the massive granite island in the kitchen, the Beretta heavy and warm in his hand. He had a spare magazine clenched between his teeth. "Declan," he whispered into his earpiece. "Status." "Elevators are disabled, boss." Declan's voice crackled, breathless. "But they aren't coming up the tubes. They're repelling. Roof access. They're coming through the terrace." Crash. The sound of reinforced glass shattering in the living room confirmed it. A canister skittered across the marble floor, hissing. "Smoke! Tear gas!" Donovan didn't wait. He moved. He rolled out from behind the island, firing 3 controlled shots into the swirling grey smoke. A shadow grunt and fell. "One down," Donovan muttered. He pulled his shirt up over his nose. The gas was acrid, burning his eyes. Automatic gunfire erupted from the smoke, chewing up the drywall behind him. Donovan dove behind a leather armchair. He was pinned. He could hear boots crunching on the glass, heavy tactical boots. There were at least 4 of them. "Move right! Flank him!" a voice shouted. It was an American accent. Clinical. Professional. Donovan popped up, fired 2 rounds, and ducked back. He hit one in the vest. The man stumbled but kept coming. Body armor. These guys were geared for war. "Nursery!" one of the attackers yelled. "Secure the asset!" Donovan's heart stopped. The asset. They meant Leo. "No!" Donovan roared. He abandoned cover, surging forward with a primal desperation. He caught the closest mercenary with a bullet to the throat, finding the gap above the Kevlar. The man dropped, but 2 others had peeled off, sprinting down the hallway towards the east wing, toward Vivian, toward Leo. "Vivian!" Donovan screamed, his voice raw. He chased them, but he was too slow. A mercenary turned and unleashed a spray of bullets that forced Donovan to dive into the guest bedroom doorway. Wood splinters rained down on him. He was trapped. He heard the nursery door kick open down the hall. He waited for the scream. He waited for the sound of a terrified woman and a crying baby. He waited for the gunshot that would end his bloodline. Instead, he heard a thud. It was a wet, heavy sound, like a side of beef hitting a butcher's block. Then a sharp crack, bone breaking. Then silence. The mercenary suppressing Donovan stopped firing. He seemed confused. "Team 2, report." Static. "Team 2." The mercenary turned his weapon towards the dark hallway. "Marco, you there?" From the darkness of the hallway, a figure emerged. It wasn't Marco. It was Vivian. She was moving so fast she was a blur. She didn't have a gun. She held the hairpin. The last mercenary raised his rifle, but Vivian dropped into a slide, closing the distance in a heartbeat. She slashed upward. The hairpin, reinforced steel, drove into the soft underside of the mercenary's wrist, severing the tendon. He dropped the rifle with a howl. Before he could draw his sidearm, Vivian was on him. She spun behind him, wrapped her arm around his neck, and torqued her hips. Snap! The man went limp, falling to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Donovan stood in the doorway, his gun lowered, his chest heaving. The hallway was littered with bodies. Vivian stood over the last man. Her hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders. She wasn't out of breath. She wasn't shaking. She looked at the dead man with a look of cold, professional detachment. She looked up and met Donovan's eyes. There was blood on her hands, not hers. "Is he safe?" Donovan asked, his voice barely audible. "He's sleeping," Vivian said quietly. "I put noise-cancelling headphones on him before they breached. He didn't hear a thing." Donovan walked past her, stepping over the bodies, and rushed into the nursery. Leo was indeed asleep in his crib, a pair of oversized, soft headphones covering his tiny ears. He looked peaceful, oblivious to the slaughter outside his door. On the floor near the changing table lay two men. One had a shattered trachea, the other had a paring knife, the one Vivian had been using to slice apples earlier, buried to the hilt in his eye socket. Donovan stared at the carnage. He had seen violence. He had committed violence. But this was surgical. This was the work of a phantom. He turned back to the doorway. Vivian was leaning against the frame, wiping her hands on a burp cloth. "Who are you?" Donovan asked. The question wasn't angry this time. It was terrified. "I told you," she said, tossing the bloodied cloth into a diaper bin. "I'm the nanny. Nannies don't take out a hit squad in 30 seconds, Vivian. Good ones do." Sirens wailed in the distance. The police were coming, or maybe Donovan's men. "We have to go," Vivian said, her voice shifting into command mode. "This location is burned. If they sent a Tier 1 team, they have a backup team 5 minutes out. Grab the diaper bag. I'll grab the boy." Donovan didn't argue. He didn't issue orders. For the first time in his life, the King of Chicago followed someone else's lead. The safe house was a converted warehouse in the meat-packing district, reinforced with steel shutters and owned by a shell company Donovan used for laundering money. It smelled of sawdust and old oil, but it was secure. Declan stood by the metal table, staring at Vivian. 4 of Donovan's most loyal soldiers stood by the doors, their hands on their weapons, watching her nervously. Vivian sat on a crate, feeding Leo a bottle. She looked completely out of place, a domestic goddess in a room full of gangsters and guns. "I ran the prints of the guys you killed," Declan said, throwing a manila folder onto the table. "They aren't local. They aren't Bratva. They aren't cartel." Donovan picked up the file. "Who are they?" "Ghost soldiers," Declan said. "Former SAS, former Delta. Scrubbed records. Mercenaries for hire, but high-end. The kind that cost 10 grand a day." Donovan looked at Vivian. "Who pays 10 grand a day to kidnap a baby?" Vivian didn't look up from Leo. They weren't there to kidnap him, Donovan. They were there to leverage him. Leverage for what? To get to the ledger. The room went silent. Donovan froze. "What ledger?" Vivian burped Leo, patting his back gently. "The one Isabella stole before she died." Donovan slammed his hand on the table. The noise echoed through the warehouse. "Isabella was a civilian. She didn't steal anything. She was a florist." Vivian finally looked up. Her gaze was pitying. "Isabella was a handler for the CIA, Donovan. She was assigned to monitor you. She fell in love with you. She went rogue, and she stole a ledger containing the names of every corrupt official in Illinois to buy your freedom. That's why she was killed, and that's why they want Leo. They think she hid the drive in his things." Donovan felt the blood drain from his face. The world tilted. His wife? A Fed? A spy? "You're lying," he snarled, pulling his gun. He pointed it at her head. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now. You're one of them." "I was," Vivian said, unfazed by the barrel aimed at her forehead. "I worked with her. We were partners in the field before I retired." "Retired?" "I couldn't do the killing anymore. I left. I went off-grid. But when I heard Isabella was dead, I knew they would come for the boy. I owed her. She saved my life in Damascus 5 years ago." She stood up, holding Leo out to Donovan. "Shoot me if you want, Mr. Kincaid. But if you do, there is no one on this earth who can stop the people coming for your son. I know their tactics. I know their comms frequencies. I know how they hunt. You have an army of street thugs. I am a scalpel. You need a scalpel." Donovan looked at his son. Leo reached out a chubby hand, grabbing Donovan's finger. Donovan slowly holstered his gun. He ran a hand through his hair, trembling with rage and shock. "Declan!" Donovan barked. "Get out! Take the boys! Guard the perimeter. If a squirrel gets within 50 yards, shoot it." "Boss?" Declan hesitated. "Out!" The room cleared. Donovan and Vivian were alone in the vast, dim warehouse. "You knew her," Donovan whispered. "Real names. Real stories." "Her real name was Sarah," Vivian said softly. "She loved lilies because they reminded her of her grandmother's garden in Vermont. She hated coffee. She only drank tea. And she loved you, Donovan. That wasn't a lie. The agency told her to seduce you, to turn you. Instead, she married you. She was going to give you the ledger so you could blackmail your way out of the mob life. She wanted you to be clean, for Leo." Donovan collapsed onto a metal chair. He put his head in his hands. The grief he had been holding back, the rage, the confusion, crashed over him. "Where is it?" Donovan asked. "The ledger." "I don't know," Vivian admitted, "but the people who killed her think it's in the penthouse. That's why they attacked. They were tearing the place apart." "We need to find it before they do," Donovan said, his voice hardening. The grieving husband was gone. The boss was back. "If what you say is true, that ledger is the only shield my son has." "There's a problem," Vivian said. She walked over to the table and pulled a small silver object from her pocket. It was a ring, Isabella's wedding ring. "I found this in the diaper bag," Vivian said. "Isabella wasn't wearing it when she was buried. The undertaker gave it to you, right?" "Yes, I put it in the safe." "No," Vivian said. "You put a replica in the safe." She switched them. "Look inside the band." Donovan took the ring. He held it up to the singular light bulb hanging above them. Etched inside the gold band, usually where a date would be, was a string of numbers. Coordinates. "She left us a map," Vivian said. "Where does it point?" "I checked the coordinates on the way here," Vivian said. She hesitated. "It's not a bank vault. It's not a storage unit." "Where is it?" "It's an old orphanage in the massive forest on the outskirts of the city. St. Jude S. It's been abandoned for 20 years. Donovan frowned. "I know that place. That's where—" He stopped. "That's where you grew up, isn't it?" Vivian asked. Donovan looked at her. "Yes, that's where I learned to kill." "Then we're going back," Vivian said. She checked the magazine of the pistol she had taken from the dead mercenary. "But we won't be alone. The man leading the hunt for the ledger. His name is Silas Vane. He was our handler. He's the one who ordered the car bomb." Donovan's eyes turned black. "Silas Vane. He's a ghost, Donovan. He doesn't exist on paper. He will," Donovan swore. "I'm going to carve his name onto a tombstone." "We have to move," Vivian said. "Vane has satellite tracking. If he pings Isabella's ring—" "He's coming," Donovan finished. "We have to lure him in," Vivian said. "We go to the orphanage. We set a trap. You, me, and the baby." "No. Leo stays here." "Leo is the bait, Donovan. Vane won't show his face unless he thinks he can get the heir and the ledger in one swoop. If we leave Leo, Vane will just burn this warehouse down with a drone strike. If we take him, Vane will come in close. He wants the boy alive to coerce you." Donovan looked at his sleeping son. The idea of using him as bait made him sick. But the idea of Vane living another day made him sicker. "We do it your way," Donovan said. "But if a single hair on his head is touched, I will die before that happens," Vivian vowed. "I promise you." Donovan nodded. He walked to the wall where a cache of weapons was stored. He grabbed an AR-15 and a tactical shotgun. He tossed a semi-automatic Sig Sauer to Vivian. "You said you were a scalpel," Donovan said, cocking the shotgun. Tonight, we're going to need a hammer. Vivian caught the gun. She checked the slide. A terrifyingly beautiful smile crossed her face. I can be a hammer. The drive to the outskirts of Chicago was a journey into the throat of the night. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, hammering the roof of the stolen black SUV. Donovan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the shifter where his shotgun lay propped. In the back seat, Vivian sat next to Leo's car seat. She was cleaning the Sig Sauer, stripping it down and reassembling it by feel in the dark. The metallic click-clack was the only sound in the car besides the rain. You grew up there, Vivian said. It wasn't a question. Donovan stared at the road, the wipers slapping a frantic rhythm. St. Jude's home for boys. The nuns were mean, but the older boys were worse. It's where you learned that if you didn't hit first, you didn't eat. Is that why you became who you are? I became who I am because the world is a hungry place, Vivian. You either sit at the table or you're on the menu. He glanced in the rear-view mirror. Her eyes were catching the passing streetlights. What about you? What made a governess into a killer? Vivian paused. She slid the magazine back into the pistol with a sharp snap. I wasn't a governess first. My father was a Marine. He wanted a son. He got me. He taught me to shoot before I could ride a bike. When I was 18, the recruiters didn't even have to pitch me. I wanted to be useful. I thought I was fighting for freedom. And were you? I was fighting for oil, and then for secrets, and then, eventually, just for money. When I met Isabella in Syria, we were both tired of the blood. We made a pact. If one of us got out, we'd pull the other one up. She looked down at Leo, who was sleeping soundly, clutching a small stuffed bear Vivian had found in the warehouse. She got out first. She found you. She told me she found a man who was dangerous, yes, but who had a code. She said you were worth saving. Donovan's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. She never told me. She couldn't. Secrets keep you safe until they kill you. They turned off the main highway onto a gravel road that wound through a dense, skeletal forest. The trees clawed at the sky, bare branches shaking in the wind. At the end of the road, looming like a tombstone against the grey clouds, stood St. Jude S. It was a Victorian monstrosity of red brick and crumbling stone. The windows were boarded up, looking like bruised eyes. The front gates hung off their hinges, rusted open in a permanent scream. "Kill the lights!" Vivian ordered. Donovan cut the engine and the headlights. They rolled to a stop in the shadow of the old bell tower. "We have 20 minutes, maybe less," Vivian whispered. "Vane will track the ring's GPS to this exact radius. Then he'll deploy drones." Donovan grabbed the shotgun and the diaper bag. Vivian hoisted Leo into a tactical carrier strapped to her chest, shielding him with her body and her trench coat. They moved towards the building. The front door was chained, but Donovan knew the way. He kicked a rotting board loose on the basement window well. They slid into the darkness of the cellar. The smell hit Donovan instantly: mold, coal dust, and the stale memory of fear. He navigated the labyrinth of the basement by memory, leading them up a narrow servant staircase that spilled out into the main chapel. The chapel was cavernous. Rows of overturned pews lay like fallen dominoes. The altar was covered in graffiti and bird droppings. A large wooden crucifix still hung on the wall, though Christ was missing an arm. "The coordinates," Vivian said, checking the ring again under the beam of a tactical flashlight. "They point to the north wall, the confessional." They walked to the wooden booths on the side of the chapel. The velvet curtains had rotted away. "Box 2, Donovan said. That was where Father Merrick sat. He was the only one who didn't hit us. Donovan stepped into the confessional. He knelt on the dusty kneeler. He ran his hand under the narrow shelf where the Bible used to sit. His fingers brushed against something taped to the wood. "Got it," he whispered. He pulled it loose. It was a small, waterproof black pouch. He ripped it open. Inside was a silver flash drive and a folded piece of paper. Donovan unfolded the paper. It was Isabella's handwriting, scrawled in a hurry, shaky. Donovan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I brought my war into your house. The drive has the names, the accounts, everything Vane and his syndicate have been doing, selling state secrets to the cartels, fixing elections. It's your insurance, but it's also a target. Vane won't stop, won't. He doesn't just want the drive. He needs to erase the evidence. I love you. I loved the life we built. It was the only real thing I ever had. Protect our boy. Bella. Donovan felt a tear, hot and sharp, in his eye. He blinked it away. He shoved the drive into his pocket. We have it, he said, his voice thick. Good, Vivian said. She was standing by the chapel doors, peering through a crack in the wood. Because they're here. Donovan joined her. Through the gap, he saw headlights cutting through the forest. Not just one car, a convoy. 3 armored SUVs and a mobile command van. They fanned out in a semicircle around the front entrance. Men spilled out, heavy hitters, night vision goggles, suppressors, body armor. In the center, stepping out of the lead SUV, was a man in a pristine white wool coat. He was tall, thin, with silver hair slicked back. He held a cane, not because he limped, but because it looked elegant. Silas Vane, Vivian whispered. The name sounded like a curse. He brought an army, Donovan noted, counting 12 men. He wants to make sure, Vivian said. She turned to Donovan. This is the kill box. The chapel has one entrance, one exit. Thick stone walls. If we hold the altar, we force them into the fatal funnel of the center aisle. And if they flank us? I rigged the side doors with the claymores we took from the warehouse, Vivian said calmly. Donovan looked at her with a mix of horror and admiration. When did you have time to do that? While you were crying over the letter, she said, not unkindly. Focus, Donovan. This ends tonight. She unstrapped Leo from her chest. Put him behind the altar. It's marble. Bulletproof. Donovan placed the carrier behind the heavy stone altar. Leo was awake now, his eyes wide, looking at the shadows dancing on the high ceiling. Stay quiet, little lion, Donovan whispered. He kissed his son's forehead. He stood up and racked the shotgun. Vivian took a position behind a fallen pillar on the left. Donovan took the right. Outside, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. It was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. Mr. Kincaid, Vivian, I know you're in there. It's a dreadful night for a church service, isn't it? Donovan stayed silent. I don't want a mess, Vane's voice continued. Give me the drive. Give me the child. And you two can walk away. You can disappear. I'm feeling generous. Donovan looked at Vivian. She shook her head. He's lying. Come and get it, you son of a bitch, Donovan roared. There was a pause. Then Vane sighed over the speaker. Very well. Burn it out. The first thing to happen was the windows. Simultaneously, 4 canisters of tear gas smashed through the boarded-up stained glass, hissing as they hit the pews. Masks! Vivian shouted. Donovan pulled a respirator from the bag. Vivian had packed them, and shoved it over his face. He tossed one to Vivian, who pulled it on. She threw a heavy plastic tarp over Leo's carrier behind the altar to seal him from the gas. Then the doors exploded. A breaching charge blew the heavy oak doors off their hinges, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Through the smoke, the laser sights cut green beams. The first wave entered. 3 men, moving in a tight wedge formation. Donovan didn't hesitate. He popped up from behind the pillar and unleashed the tactical shotgun. The roar was deafening in the enclosed space. The buckshot hit the lead man in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him back into the others. The formation broke. Vivian double-tapped the second man with her Sig Sauer. 2 shots to the head, clean and efficient. The third man scrambled for cover behind a pew, spraying automatic fire towards the altar. Marble chips exploded near Donovan's face. Suppressing fire, Vivian yelled. She leaned out and fired 3 rapid shots, keeping the man's head down. Donovan flanked right, moving low. He closed the distance, pumped the shotgun, and fired through the back of the pew. The wood disintegrated. The man behind it screamed and fell silent. "First wave down!" Donovan yelled. "Claymores!" Vivian warned. The side doors of the chapel kicked open. 2 more teams were trying to flank them. Click! Boom! The claymore mines Vivian had rigged detonated. The explosion shook the foundation of the old orphanage. Dust and plaster rained down from the ceiling. The screams from the side entrances were cut short. "That bought us a minute," Vivian panted, reloading. "But Vane won't send men into a meat grinder forever. He's going to—" A red dot appeared on Donovan's chest. Vivian didn't think. She tackled him. Thwip. A high-caliber round punched through the marble pillar right where Donovan had been standing. "Sniper!" Vivian hissed, dragging Donovan behind the altar. "Through the bell tower window. He's in the trees." They were pinned. If they moved left or right, the sniper had the angle. If they stayed, Vane's ground team would rush the center. Leo began to cry. The sound pierced the gunfire, high and terrified. "He hears the baby," Donovan groaned. "He knows exactly where we are." From the smoke-filled entrance, Silas Vane walked in. He wasn't running. He wasn't crouching. He walked casually, stepping over the body of one of his mercenaries. He held a gold-plated revolver in one hand and a handkerchief over his nose with the other. He was flanked by 2 massive bodyguards carrying riot shields. "Impressive," Vane called out, his voice echoing in the ruined chapel. "Truly, the nanny and the gangster. It's almost poetic." He stopped 20 yards from the altar. The bodyguards planted the shields, creating a mobile fortress. "You're out of options, Donovan," Vane said. "My sniper has the altar dialed in. If you stand up, you die. If you stay there, my men will toss a grenade over the top and turn your son into pink mist." Donovan looked at Vivian. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, the blood running into her eye. She wiped it away, her face a mask of determination. "What do you want, Vane?" Donovan shouted from behind the marble. "I want the ledger. Throw it out." "If I give it to you, you kill us anyway." "Perhaps. But maybe I let the boy live. I have buyers for healthy white infants in Jakarta. Better than dead, isn't it?" Donovan growled, a low, animalistic sound. He looked at the shotgun. He had 2 shells left. Vivian had 1 magazine. "I have an idea," Vivian whispered. She looked up at the ceiling, directly above Vane's position. A massive, rusted iron chandelier hung by a single chain. It was swaying slightly from the explosions. "The sniper is watching the altar," Vivian whispered. "He's not watching the ceiling." "It's too far," Donovan whispered back. "I can't hit the chain with a shotgun from here." "I can," Vivian said, "but I have to stand up. He'll kill you. He'll try." She gripped Donovan's arm. "When the chandelier falls, the shields will break. You rush, Vane. You don't stop for anything. You put him down." "Vivian, no." "Donovan," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "I told you. I need redemption. This is it." She didn't wait for his permission. Vivian took a breath. She closed her eyes for a split second, centering herself. Then she surged up. She didn't aim at Vane. She aimed her pistol at the rusty chain 30 feet above their heads. Crack! The sniper fired. Bang, bang, bang! Vivian fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The bullet from the sniper hit Vivian in the shoulder, spinning her around. She collapsed behind the altar with a cry of pain. But her aim had been true. The 3rd bullet shattered the rusted link of the chain. With a groan of metal, the 2-ton iron chandelier plummeted. Vane looked up, his composure finally breaking. "Oh, crash!" The chandelier smashed into the floor with the force of a meteor. It crushed the 2 bodyguards and their shields instantly. Dust billowed out in a massive shockwave. Vane was thrown backward by the impact, his white coat covered in debris, his revolver skittering across the floor. "Now!" Vivian screamed, clutching her bleeding shoulder. Donovan vaulted over the altar. He charged through the dust cloud, the shotgun raised. He didn't look at the sniper fire chipping the floor behind him. He looked only at Vane. Vane was scrambling on the ground, reaching for his gold gun. Donovan got there first. He kicked the gun away. Vane looked up, his face twisted in hate. He pulled a knife from his belt, a desperate last resort. Donovan didn't shoot him. He reversed the shotgun and slammed the buttstock into Vane's face. Bone crunched. Vane fell back, spitting blood. Donovan dropped the shotgun. He reached down, grabbed Vane by the lapels of his expensive coat, and hauled him up. "You wanted a monster!" Donovan snarled, his face inches from Vane's ruined nose. "You got one! Do it!" Vane spat, grinning through broken teeth. "Kill me! The agency! They'll never stop! You're dead, Kincaid! You're—" Donovan didn't let him finish. He threw Vane backward, hard. Vane stumbled, his back hitting the stone wall. Donovan pulled the Beretta from his waistband. "This is for Isabella. Bang! One shot, center mass." Vane crumpled. "And this," Donovan stepped closer, aiming down, "is for making my son cry." Bang! Silas Vane lay still. The King of Chicago stood over him, breathing hard, the silence of the chapel rushing back in. But the silence was broken by a gasp. "Donovan!" He spun around. Vivian was slumped against the altar, her hand pressed to her shoulder. Blood was pooling dark and fast on the white marble floor. Her face was grey. "Vivian!" Donovan holstered his gun and ran to her. He slid to his knees, his hands hovering over the wound. It was bad, high shoulder, near the collarbone. "Did you get him?" she wheezed. "He's dead. He's gone." Donovan ripped off his shirt and pressed it against the wound to staunch the flow. "Stay with me, Vivian. Stay with me." "I'm cold," she whispered. Her eyes were losing focus. "No, no, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to be the hero and leave." Donovan picked her up. She was limp in his arms. He looked at the carrier. Leo was wailing now, terrified by the noise. Donovan grabbed the carrier handle with one hand, holding Vivian tight against his chest with the other. He had to get to the car. He had to get to a doctor. But as he turned to the exit, he saw headlights again. More cars. Blue and red lights this time. Police. Or feds. They were surrounded. Donovan looked at the back door of the chapel, the one leading to the old catacombs that exited in the woods. "Hold on," he whispered to the unconscious woman in his arms. "We're not done yet." The catacombs beneath St. Jude's smelled of wet earth and impending death. Donovan moved through the darkness, carrying Vivian's limp body like it was the only thing holding the world together. "Stay with me," Donovan grunted, kicking open the rotted exit door. "Don't you dare quit on me, Vivian." "Tired," she whispered, her head lolling against his chest, blood soaking his shirt. They burst into the freezing rain of the forest. Donovan wasted no time. He sprinted to where he'd stashed a rusted Ford pickup 3 years ago, his emergency exit. He strapped Leo's carrier into the passenger seat and laid Vivian across the bench, her head on his lap. The engine roared to life. Donovan floored it, tearing through the mud, leaving the sirens and the slaughter behind. "I can't go to a hospital," Vivian murmured, her skin turning grey. "Interpol." "I know," Donovan said, merging onto the highway. "We're going to the vet." Dr. Arthur Sterling lost his medical license in '98 for operating on mobsters. Now he ran a dilapidated clinic in Pilsen. When Donovan kicked the back door in, Sterling turned pale. "Jesus, Don, is that a woman?" "Gunshot wound, high shoulder. Fix her. I treat golden retrievers now. I don't have the anesthesia for—" Donovan slammed Sterling against the wall. "She saved my son. If she dies, you die. Fix her." The next hour was an eternity. Under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights, Donovan sat on a plastic stool, rocking Leo, while the disgraced doctor worked. The rhythm of the heart monitor was the only music. Beep, beep, beep. Donovan looked at Leo. The baby watched the surgery with wide, curious eyes. "She's going to be okay," Donovan whispered, trying to believe it. "She's a tank. She's a scalpel." Finally, the clatter of metal ceased. Sterling pulled down his mask, sweating. "She's stable," he exhaled. "Missed the artery by a millimeter. She's strong." Donovan stood up and walked to the metal table. Vivian looked pale, like a marble statue, but her chest rose and fell. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're hired," he whispered, "permanently." 6 months later. The sun over the Amalfi Coast was brighter than anything in Chicago. Donovan sat on the terrace of a secluded villa, a newspaper spread before him. The headline read, "Corruption Ring Exposed, Senator Vane Dead." Isabella's flash drive had done its work. The house of cards had fallen. As for Donovan Kincaid, he was legally dead, killed in a penthouse explosion. The man sipping espresso on the cliffside was just Mr. Black, a vineyard owner. Frowning again? Vivian stepped onto the terrace. She wore a white sundress, the scar on her shoulder barely visible under the strap. She looked radiant, the shadows of the assassin gone from her eyes. Leo, now a year old and crawling with terrifying speed, zoomed past her and grabbed Donovan's leg. Donovan scooped him up, listening to his son's laugh, a sound that had once seemed impossible. "We need to go to the market," Vivian said, smiling. "We're out of vanilla." Donovan stood up, moving close to her. The scent of lemon and sea salt surrounded them. "You could have left," he said softly, "after the surgery. You had the money. You could have disappeared alone." Vivian reached up, straightening his collar. "I know." "Why didn't you?" "Because I found something here I never found in the agency," she whispered. "A home, and a man who knows that even monsters can be saved." Donovan took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I don't know if I'm saved, Vivian, but I know I'm not alone." "No," she agreed, leaning her head against his chest. "You're not." Donovan looked out at the glittering Mediterranean, then back at the woman who had walked through the rain and changed everything. "Vivian? Do you still have that hairpin?" She laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Always." "Why?" Donovan kissed her forehead. "Just checking. Remind me never to make you angry, and that is how the Mafia boss and the assassin found peace, not by escaping their pasts, but by fighting for their future. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes the family you choose is the strongest bond of all." Wow, that was a ride. I honestly didn't think Vivian was going to make it out of that chapel.